Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to introduce you to Mark from AbilityNet. This is the first sort of broadcast of The Future Is Now, and he's here to talk about everything that his organisation does. And we've got Robin on Skype.
In a cab.
In a cab somewhere. He's going to hook up in a minute. So Mark's going to speak to you now, and I'll hand over to him.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm going to introduce AbilityNet. Robin was meant to be on there as we speak, so I'm filling in slightly, but what I'm going to do is tell you a bit about what we're going to talk about, and also want to know a bit more about what your interests are and your current knowledge. So I work for a charity called AbilityNet. We are UK based, although we sort of have a global reach. Lots of people use our resources from all over the world. And the areas that we specialise in are technology and disability. So our particular area of interest is the ways in which technology helps people with disabilities at home, at work, and in education. We do lots of different services around those three areas of work. So in the workplace, we can provide assessments for people to look at what technology would help them in their job, and employers are required to give disabled people extra support, and so we give advice on what that extra support would be. In education, if you're eligible for a Disabled Students Allowance, DSA, which some in FER and all in HE, or in higher education, students are eligible for that if they have a disability and go through the appropriate process. We then talk to those people one-to-one, identify what their needs are, and provide advice about technology that could help them. And we also have a network of volunteers who go into people's homes, principally older people, but disabled people of all ages can ask for somebody to come and help them with their technology at home. Some of the stuff we do is quite basic, just setting up routers and making sure the viruses are cleaned off and those sorts of things. But our volunteers are also able to help with some quite specific software to help people with particular disabilities. So we cover a huge range of stuff. We have some paid-for services. We have some services that are supported by charitable funding, and we are probably the leading agency in the work that we do. There are other organisations who do help with some of the bits that we do, but we cover all ages, all disabilities, and all technologies. So it's a huge scope of work that we do. And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of what's just happening now in terms of what those technologies might be. So in the time I've been at AbilityNet, which is 5 years, one of the massive changes in technology is mobile and the capability of our phones. So this is an iPhone, and an iPhone can do an awful lot of what you used to have to spend an awful lot of money on 5 years ago even. So the capabilities of this thing, just by the fact it's in your pocket, that you're carrying it around, that it's got a great processor in it, it's got a really good camera, it's connected to the internet the whole time, those sorts of things that we have already started taking for granted about these devices has transformed some of the options, particularly for people with particular disabilities. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about disability and technology before we have Robin talking about the future. I just thought I'd show you something and talk to you a little bit about this and get your thoughts. So we divide the world up into 4 or 5 main areas in terms of impairments. If I show you this tool, this is called My Computer, My Way, and it shows you the sort of areas that we help people with. So those are seeing the screen, hearing sound, what you can do with a keyboard and mouse, and what you can do about reading and spelling. And I'll just briefly give you an example of each of those, just to give you a sense of what we do and what we talk about when we're doing our work. So the reasons you can't see the screen, because you have a vision impairment of some kind. So some people are completely blind. The majority of people who have a vision impairment can see something, they just can't necessarily see it very clearly, or like me, they wear glasses. And a huge number of people we think of as being visually impaired are just old. And as you get old, your eyes change and you need to wear glasses. So that's a simple example of something which you may not consider to be disabled, but where technology may be something that can help. Just pause a moment. So seeing the screen may be something where you can't see it at all. Can anybody guess what you do if you can't see the screen at all? Anybody know? Anybody use? Anybody here can't see the screen at all for any reason? Completely blind. Anybody know anybody who's completely blind and knows how they use the screen? No? You get the computer to speak to you mainly, and you speak back to the computer. So in this phone here, you can in this phone here, you can speak to it and it can speak back to you, and that's built in. You can pay for software to make that work more effectively. You can pay for software to work on your desktop computer differently to the way that it works on your mobile phone. But the capability of speaking to your computer and having it read back to you, you can imagine how powerful that is for somebody who literally can't see. So there's an example of something that technology is already doing. Hearing. There's lots of different pieces of technology that can help with people who have difficulty hearing, which can range from difficulty hearing particular sounds to not being able to hear sound at all. The most obvious one is captioning. You will have noticed this is a very interesting phenomenon in the last 12 months, maybe a little bit longer. On your Facebook feed, how many videos have got subtitles? And it used to be the case that almost no video content had subtitles. It was really difficult to find content. The BBC publishes lots of content with subtitles on, but pretty much no other broadcaster did it, or does it as routinely as they do. But does anybody know why you started seeing subtitles on Facebook posts, on videos on Facebook posts? No? Anybody making videos that go into Facebook? And are you adding subtitles to them? And it's because the majority of video content that people watch on Facebook is with the sound switched off. So because the sound's switched off, you've got to play the captions to show people what the message is. Do you recognise what I'm talking about? You know when you started seeing videos now. And next time you're on Facebook and you have a look, the amount of video content on Facebook has gone through the roof. And the amount of captioning on Facebook videos has gone through the roof because we watch Facebook mainly silently. So that's a little bit like not being able to hear it at all. And so Sky News is a very good example. All of their content on the, I think their live content has some captioning, but certainly recorded content all has subtitles now. So you've gone from a world where there was very little content that was subtitled to a world where a lot of content is subtitled simply because of the way that we consume social media. And there are lots of other examples of technologies that can help people with difficulty with hearing. The keyboard and mouse, this is a, I don't know if this is connected, this is a standard keyboard and mouse. This is attached to something, I can't lift it up very high. There's lots of reasons why you wouldn't be able to use a keyboard. Can anybody think of a reason why you wouldn't be able to use a standard keyboard? Anybody have difficulty? Cerebral palsy, a physical disability of some kind, where you literally can't hit the key. There's some people have difficulty making the key work the way they want it to. So a good example is people with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, where their hands are shaking, and so they're having difficulty hitting the right key. Might need a bigger keyboard. You can get keys with guards on them so that they stand up. You can't hit the wrong key very easily. Another example would be that you talk to your computer rather than using the keyboard, because that's quicker and easier than typing, particularly if you have difficulty hitting the right key. Then it might be easier to talk to the keyboard rather than even having a new keyboard. A mouse is equally difficult to control if you've got shaky hands, and so you might have an upside down mouse. You've seen those trackballs that have a big ball sit on top and you move that around. And they're standard, lots of people have those because they get RSI, so they get some sort of problem with their hand. You know how clicking the mouse is bad for your arm, and it can give you pain in the arm, like tennis elbow. Then a different type of mouse may help as well. And then the final area, we do lots and lots of work in this area around reading and spelling, and in particular in our education work is around dyslexia and related conditions. Dyspraxia and dyscalculia are good examples, where what you need is some help between you and the information. And the most common one used to be pre-computers. Somebody with dyslexia often benefits from a colour overlay on the top of the page. So I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're like a piece of acetate. You put them over the top of the text, and then the person dyslexic could read the page more easily. Well, on most, well certainly if you're using Word, it's fairly easy to put that colour over the top. It's something that's actually built into Word now. And lots of programs exist that can put those overlays onto the page to make that page easier to read, whether it's in Word or a browser or your email or wherever it is. So you can imagine somebody with dyslexia, particularly in education, is going to have to consume lots of written materials, and that will be a very simple thing that would help them. And equally, if they have dyslexia, often they're going to sort of have problems or difficulties with spelling. And one thing we always recommend to people is that they really train their autocorrect. They personalise their autocorrect. So you can go into Word and set up the most common things you spell wrong so that it puts it right as you're typing. And so they're very simple things. You may already take autocorrect for granted. That's quite an amazing piece of technology on its own. But certainly going in and doing small things to your own technology will help the technology suit your needs an awful lot more. And you'll notice that we call this resource here, this is a free guide that you can access on our website called My Computer My Way. And you'll notice that it's called My Computer My Way. It covers laptops, desktops, smartphones. We're talking about how it's got to cover cars. We're going to be talking to our cars very soon, if not already. And the screens on our cars will be an important way of us communicating about what we want the car to do. As Robin will reveal to you in a while, we're doing lots of stuff around autonomous cars that will drive for you. These are the technologies that are on our roads already that were around the corner in terms of mainstream technology. That could transform the lives of disabled people, and as much as they will anybody in the community. So we go from the day-to-day technology, if you like, through to robots, artificial intelligence. Some of the stuff that you'll see Robin talking about today sort of exists. It certainly exists in his mind, if no one else's, and is about the ways that technologies are going to change our lives, as opposed to what we've got in front of us now. But he'll also talk about the ways in which the technologies we have now are changing our lives already. So I'm waiting to see Robin arrive, still away. So does anybody use any of the pieces of technology that I've just mentioned? Hi, did you?
Hello.
Hello.
I use speech-to-text
Cool.
technology, which helps me actually speak it, and then the phone actually types what I've just said.
And what phone have you got?
Samsung X.
So just is it on standard
I'm
Android?
not sure which one, but yeah, I use that, and I use another piece of technology program that does that on my laptop.
Right. So one's a specialist and the other one's built in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's quite typical. There may be, and presumably the built-in one is slightly, that sort of specialist one's probably more capable and learns quicker and more accurately.
Yeah.
But the phone, I mean, I speak my messages, often text messages, as I'm walking along because it's quicker and easier than trying to type as you're walking
But
along.
sometimes it doesn't actually connect because you have to use the Google Connect and turn on your Wi-Fi to use it.
Yeah.
To do it right.
Well, that's interesting. A lot of the capabilities that we have in our devices come from the cloud. So when, who's got an iPhone? Few. Half, a third? Wow, maybe I thought there'd be more. Who's got an Android phone? Half again. Well, both of them rely on the cloud for things like Google Now and Siri. Those are the two obvious things that you may have used or heard of. They're using the processing power of the cloud to translate your words into text, and vice versa. It can read back to you as well. There are programs in the phone that will read pages back to you. So if you can't see for any reason, and one of the reasons you might not be able to see is just because it's a sunny day and the light is on your screen. So I've got it set up so I can have messages read back to me as I'm walking around, and I don't have to get it out of my pocket. So they're sometimes for convenience, and they're just sometimes because it's the only way you can access that information at that particular time. Cool. So I'm going to start without. Does that say online? Yes, it does. Can we ring Robin? Dial Robin in. So Robin works for AbilityNet as well. He's been there since it started in the late 90s. And he is our head of digital inclusion. And the idea of digital inclusion is that we want everybody to be able to benefit from the technologies that are being created around us, and not just the people who can afford it, for example. So very often these technologies are expensive, or they're only available in certain, to certain people in certain places. So Robin is like our ambassador, he goes out and talks to people. We decided to use Skype as the way of doing this. I live in Brighton, he lives in Warwick, so he's calling in from Warwick. Hopefully he's there. And that's where our office is as well, that's why he was in the cab, he's coming back from the office. Might have to ring him. Hiya, we can see that you're there, but we can't call you. Okay, do you want to call us when you're ready? Okay. Power of technology. Now, Robin goes all over the world. One of the things he does, which you may be interested in, and we haven't mentioned this yet, an awful lot of work that we do is trying to make the internet accessible to people with all sorts of needs. So, does anybody know what accessibility means in terms of websites and apps? Anybody heard of that phrase? An accessible website, an accessible app? No? So on a website, a very simple example would be making sure that the images that are on the page have got alt text on them. Who's heard of alt text? Shame on you. So when you drop an image into a web page, you put a little bit of descriptor in it to say this is a picture of, or something that conveys the information that's in the image. And you're doing that because some people who use the internet can't see that information. So the picture, which may otherwise be what you're relying on to convey the information, if somebody who was blind was using that web page, they wouldn't be able to see the information. So you type into it to say it's a picture of, so that people know what it is. And of course on that basis it means that anybody can use the internet, whether they can see or not. And there are lots of circumstances where somebody trying to use a web page can't connect, can't use your service because you haven't put that sort of information into it. So one of the areas of work that we do a lot of work on, we work with Barclays Bank, Heathrow Airport, British Airways, lots of big companies, helping them make sure their services are accessible to everybody. They have a legal responsibility to do that. It's a bit like building a new building and not putting a ramp for wheelchairs up to the building. Building a digital service and not making it accessible to everyone is actually illegal as well. Is that coming through over there? You're in the dark. You forgot to turn the lights on. Haven't revealed that yet. Robin's blind. Hello.
Is this alright?
Yeah, I can see now. How you doing? Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
Cool. So, I've just been talking through what we do, the work that we do, and explaining a little bit of the background in terms of accessibility. So I haven't quite got to the point that you're starting at. But we've got, 100 people here, is it? 60, 70 people all ready to go. So if you're ready to roll,
Yep.
I shall have a go.
Is the camera angle alright?
Yeah, you're perfect. It's not okay. At your nostrils, that's fine. I'm going to just switch over to the slides and then I'll let you take it away. You just need to tell me when you finish talking about the topic and I'll put it on to the next one. So, Robin, over to you. We're on the first slide, the power and the promise.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Can I hear people if they say hi? Oh, okay, good. So yeah, apologies for the delay in kicking off here. So I just have been asked to talk about technology and how technology is incredibly empowering for people with a range of different disabilities. So if we go on to the first slide, what we've got here is a typical setup of computer. Way back in the 80s when the PC first came along, everything changed for people with disabilities. I mean, everything changed for everyone, and now 90% of jobs in the UK use a computer of some shape or form. It might not look like this, but nevertheless, computers are absolutely everywhere. You've probably got at least one, if not three, computers on your person at this very moment. Back in the 80s, when the advent of the personal computer came along, everything changed for people with disabilities in particular, because everything that you can see here is optional. So the screen, you can have a really big screen, you could have a speech output that I have to use, you could make the text bigger on the screen or change the colours, that sort of thing. There are so many different choices about how you can get information out of the computer. The keyboard or mouse, how you put information into the computer. There are millions of different choices there, including changing settings within the computer itself. If you could start to get wrist pain, you might want to choose a different mouse, or you want to use voice recognition to be able to dictate rather than use a physical input method if you've got pain or discomfort, or if you've got a disability of some kind, which means that is difficult. Even the tower itself, that big old hunking computer that you can see there, that could be in so many different shapes or forms. It could be built into the screen, it could be in your pocket connected via Bluetooth, it could be halfway across the world, it could be in the cloud, etc., etc. The main power of technology is in this choice, and if something doesn't work for you, then there are 10 or 100 different other choices or options that you can try, and that's what AbilityNet is all about, and I'm sure that's what Mark has been talking to you about. If we go on to the next slide. Now, with the advent of the smartphone, which happened sort of 7 or 8 years ago now, most notably, at the beginning of the iPhone, which sort of kicked off the modern era of smartphones, that was arguably an even more important revolution, because now you've got all the power of a computer with you all of the time, in your pocket, on your wrist. I've got an Apple Watch, for example, which is a fantastic addition to the technology that I carry around with me. And not only have you got the power of the computer, you've also got all these additional sensors like a camera, a GPS, accelerometer, all of these different things with you all of the time. And if, like me, some of your own senses don't work, then these sensors can be incredibly empowering, as we'll see in a moment. Before we go on to the next slide, this lady, she's wearing glasses. Perhaps she wears glasses to read. Loads of us wear glasses. It's very common. And what we're now entering into is an age of extreme computing. So whereas before, on that PC that we saw on the last slide, it's usually in quite a controlled environment. If you find it difficult to see the screen, you can get a bigger screen. If the sun's on the screen, you can pull down the blinds or turn on the lights if it's too dim, that sort of thing. But now, with the age of mobile computing, everybody is, in effect, temporarily disabled or impaired and has exactly the same needs as people who have a permanent disability or a disability with a capital D because of environment. So here we've got this lady, she's struggling to see this screen. It's a sheet of shiny glass and it's a bright sunny day. And if she's trying to access content that might have been created by people like yourselves, where the colours aren't great, they're not very contrasting, the text size is a bit mean, it's not a generous text size, for example, then she's going to struggle just like someone with a vision impairment would struggle 24/7. So she's situationally disabled. And if we go on to the next slide, here we've got somebody who's holding a smartphone in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other, so he's probably on his coffee break. And he's, again, sort of situationally impaired. So he's trying to juggle the phone one-handed, do everything with his thumb, for example. He might be walking along and that adds an extra level of complexity. So his requirements for being able to effectively use an application or a website are exactly the same as somebody who is motor impaired 24/7. So keep, good separation between tappable areas, hotspots on your apps or websites. Follow the guidelines about a minimum default hotspot size, 44 by 44 px, by the way. So good use of separation, decent size of things that you can tap on will help him, but they'll also help people who have got a motor disability, Parkinson's or a tremor, age-related condition, that sort of thing. And he's also got a cup of coffee in his hand, so he might be time constrained. We'd love to have an all-day coffee break, but sometimes you only get 10 minutes. You have to queue up in the line for the coffee as well. So he might only have like 90 seconds left of his coffee break to do something on his phone, whatever he's doing, buy something, find out a bit of information. If you haven't got extreme usability, extreme UX, then he might not achieve that in the time constraint that he's got. And to that extent, he's got exactly the same requirement there as somebody who's got a learning difficulty or a learning disability, for example. If your websites, your apps aren't extremely usable, then those people will struggle to complete that transaction or find out the bit of information that they need to, regardless of how much time they have. So this chap who's time constrained perhaps is exactly the same. So you're getting the idea here, there are so many parallels. If we go on to the next one. So I wanted to find a slide of somebody that had like enormous sausage mutant fingers, but I couldn't find one. So just imagine that this person has got big sausage fingers. And we don't all have massive jumbo-sized phones yet. You know, they are becoming more popular, but some people still have just normal-sized phones. They don't have big phablets. And so if you've got big fingers and you're trying to access content on a normal phone, or even a big phone, you've got, again, that same problem of being, in effect, dexterity or motor impaired because you've got big fingers. So we're in a completely different age now where there's no such thing about accessibility being for disabled people. In fact, the actual very term itself, accessibility, with the connotations of being just for disabled people is quite a dangerous term. So we would actually like to use the word or the phrase digital inclusion or inclusive design. So inclusive design is not just for disabled people, it's for every single user. And because it's not just for disabled people, it shouldn't be like this bolt-on thing, which, you know, if you haven't got enough time or expertise, when push comes to shove, because it's bolted on, it's easy to drop off. So hopefully you're beginning to get the idea. Inclusive design, following the guidelines that help people with extreme difficulties will help people in extreme environments. If we go on to the next slide. So what we've got here is it's a blank screen in a car. The reason why I'm including this one is because, in effect, in a car, you know, you've got no UI at all. It's a bit like the Amazon Echo or the Google Home Hub. It's what's called a headless UI. You know, you can't really interact with your phone in a meaningful way in the car, or at least you shouldn't. So something like Waze, for example, or a sat-nav, other sat-navs, you might set them up before you go and then glance at them from time to time. But certainly speech output is a regular, common add-on because it's not going to rely on people looking at a screen all the time. So what would your content, what would your project, your functionality look like in a headless UI situation? I use the Amazon Echo at home all the time, and new skills are being created all the time. So maybe you're going to do a project that would involve creating a skill for the Amazon Echo, or perhaps you're just going to create functionality which can be repurposed easily through an API, for example, or at least separating functionality from presentation, so that in future you can reskin that or repurpose it very easily for another platform like this. We're in an age now where you're going to have to be thinking about loads of different platforms and loads of different use cases in everything that you do. Move on to the next slide.
Can I just interrupt a second? I just want to see, from a show of hands, who here is building apps and websites? Who's got that in the work that they do? I know that some of you do, but I don't know how many. So you're doing digital work. So this is the point that Robert's making about moving into the new era of how you design these things and who you're designing them for. So, Robin, there's not a huge number here, probably a quarter of people who are involved in that sort of thing. So just to underline that.
Thanks. Everybody else, though, creates Word documents. They send, you know, HTML emails. They might create PowerPoint presentations. They are creating digital content, and there will be some functionality in those at some point. But even if you're just sending emails and making Word documents, if you follow the guidelines, then those things will be able to be repurposed and accessible and inclusive for people. So digital marketing, you know, e-marketing, multimedia content, there are so many parallels where if you follow the guidelines and make them inclusive for disabled people like myself, they're going to be able to be repurposed and accessed very easily, regardless of what other kind of way that people will be accessing that content. So on the next slide, we've got some people with a disability here. So I've mentioned about how incredibly useful inclusive design is for everybody, but there's no doubt at all that disabled people, and I'm no exception, absolutely love technology, and in this case, smartphones. I'm a very avid smartphone user. I use it all the time, and when you can't access printed materials, you need to have help with mobility when you're out and about, the smartphone is an absolute godsend, and we'll look at some of those later on. So don't be under any illusion at all that disabled people are going to be accessing your content. They absolutely will on a very regular basis. Don't think for 1 second that you have to do something specifically for a disabled audience, like a special app for, I don't know, someone like myself who can't see. And it's only at that point that disabled people will be accessing your websites or your materials. It certainly isn't. 1 in 5 people in the UK have a disability, so there's a massive market, and it's an ageing population, so that number is just going up. Disabled people will be accessing every single thing that you do, so you can't avoid it, and you have to really think about doing things inclusively, and that will get them and everybody else as well. On the next slide, here's Professor Hawking. Here's a really good example of somebody who is a brilliant illustration of how, the empowering potential of technology. So for me, absolute godsend. I wouldn't be able to do, what I do without technology. And for someone like Professor Hawking, who's provided so much for society and for the furtherment of science and technology, he wouldn't certainly be able to provide those valuable contributions without technology. And then on the last slide for now, this is just a screenshot of the settings. This is an iPhone 4, and way back then, Apple, who have blazed a trail ever since and have sort of really led the way in accessibility, had all these different accessibility settings. And so I was able to use a smartphone right from the 3GS actually. But here's, there's a really good range here. We've got the high contrast, high visibility settings turned on here. So I would really encourage you guys to go into the accessibility settings. Hopefully now you realise that they're not just for people with a disability. There will be stuff in there that will make your phones easier to use on Android, on iOS, whatever phone you're using. You will be able to make things better for you. They're really meant for everybody. So if we go on to the next slide now, I don't know, Mark, have you put the videos within there?
I've got the videos here. I'm going to play them separately from the hard drive.
So what we've got, we're going to watch a quick video here, and after the first few seconds, if you could just put the volume down or mute it a little bit so that I can talk over it. So, reading music.
The music is playing. I don't know whether you can hear it, but it is.
I can, yeah.
Quite quiet.
So if you could mute that for me. So yeah, sorry about not having the music, so I can talk over it. So what we've got here is something that every one of you has if you've got the Google Search app on your phone. So if it's Android, you'll have it anyway. The Google Translate app. On iOS, obviously, it's available as well. And if you tap on the camera button, this is what you'll see. If you point at any piece of printed text, a menu in a restaurant, a poster on the wall, street sign, whatever it might be, in another language, you can specify, well, I want to translate things from Turkish into English or whatever it might be. What we've got here is this kind of augmented reality approach, which is, it's quite magical, really. It tries to retain the look and feel of the original document. The main thing we're demonstrating here is this automatic translation. You literally just open the app, tap on that button, and anything you point at will be instantly translated, which is really quite amazing. For someone like myself, who would otherwise have to deal with, an app for translating stuff, and obviously I can't use a printed pocket, phrase book or translation dictionary or whatever. This is incredibly useful. So, when your own eyes don't work, even in foreign countries, having a camera with some smarts behind it like this, and with this groovy kind of AR magic going on as well, it's really, it's a game changer for people with disabilities. This is a mainstream thing. It's certainly not meant for people with disabilities, but it's disproportionately beneficial for someone like myself, who otherwise would find it really difficult or time-consuming to interact with apps or other ways of, in this case, translating content. So if we close that, I want to move on to the next one.
Yep.
Very easily with the iPhone 4. They're able to talk to each other. Now, if that's not awesome, I don't know what is.
You just stop it there. So I think we missed the first couple of seconds of that one, but that's fine. What we've got here is, I mentioned way back, when the iPhone 4 came out, also FaceTime, which I'm sure you guys know, it's like, video calling. But because it's built into the phone, it's suddenly available on everyone who's got an iPhone 4 or above. And as soon as a new technology like FaceTime, in this case, free video calling from any phone to another comes out, it's a mainstream thing that just adds that extra level of niceness. You can see people's faces as you speak, etc. But imagine what it did for people with disabilities. So here we've got two people who are deaf. They're signing to each other. So as soon as that facility became available, they jumped on it and used it to really augment their communication. And this chap in Apple Store in Texas was so impressed by these two people using FaceTime for this purpose that he had to whip out his phone and do a quick recording of them. For me, I use FaceTime all the time. If I'm out and about and I need a bit of assistance from someone, I could just fire that up and get a pair of remote eyes to be able to help me. with, reading something or whatever it might be. We'll have a look in a moment at really clever apps that can do a lot in image processing, recognition, that sort of thing. But sometimes you need an actual human on the other end to answer a very complicated question or whatever it might be. So
I've gone on to the next
before
one.
we'll fire it up.
Yeah.
So this is Google Glass, which is obviously defunct now, RIP.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Start captions.
No, not yet.
Hey Jim, how's it going?
Okay, yes, well played. Okay, sorry. So yeah, Google Glass here, very quick video clip of someone using it to do real-time signing, subtitles when somebody's talking into the app on a connected mobile phone. So yeah, keep going. Thanks.
Great, Jay. How are you today?
Pretty good. I had a question about the classes you teach. I wanted to know if I could help you at all with the class.
Oh, what a great offer. In fact, I'd like to show off Google Glass and this application to class.
How long have you been teaching here at Tech?
Jay, I've been teaching here since 1991, about 22 years ago.
Let's stop it there.
Yeah.
So what we've got there is Google Glass, which, as I say, is no longer available, but there are so many other head-mounted camera alternatives, like the pivot head glasses that we'll look at in a moment. And they're using the sort of language real-time translation capabilities that Google do so well, in that case, to give someone with a hearing impairment subtitles so that they don't have to rely on lip reading, for example. So it's an example of a mainstream technology being used to help someone with a disability who, that's a game changer for someone who might struggle in noisy environments or when the lighting's bad to be able to tell what people are saying to them. And just, perhaps contrary to sort of popular belief, not everyone with a hearing impairment, particularly when it comes on later in life, finds lip reading easy at all. So that's incredibly useful. I'll just set up the next video. So you guys will soon get the message that we're not going to play all of each of the videos that we show. Don't worry, we'll give you a link to all of the videos so you can watch them again in your own time. We'll email those to Juan or whoever would be the right person to be able to disseminate those.
I'm sorry I was late.
It's playing, Robert, so.
Okay. Do you want to pause it a sec?
Hey, I'm sorry I'm late. Parking was crazy. I haven't been here before, but
That's okay. It's nice to finally meet you.
it's good to meet you. That came out of your iPhone.
Yeah, I have laryngitis, so I will be communicating through my new iVoice application. I programmed all of my responses for the night.
Okay, you mean you're writing it down somehow and it's reading it back to me.
No, all my responses are pre-programmed for tonight.
So you know everything I'm going to say tonight?
Well, I know how I'm going to respond to everything you are going to say tonight.
Okay, then what's my favorite color?
I don't know what your favorite color is, silly.
But you knew I was going to say, what's my favorite color?
I knew I was going to respond. I don't know what your favorite color is, silly.
Well, it's blue, in case you were wondering.
Oh, my brother's favorite color is blue too.
Okay, hold on. If you knew your brother's favorite color was blue too, then you would know my favorite color is blue when I asked you what's my favorite color moments ago. Because I'm the two. I'm the two in that statement you made.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Okay, if we stop it there. So, as I was saying, I'll also tweet links to all of these with at USA number 2 day, USA 2 day, afterwards if people want to grab them that way as well. The reason why we're not showing all of each of these is for time considerations. We'll get through as much as we can, but also in the case of that one, it gets a bit saucy later on. So have a look at that one. Why did we show that one? Well, we've been talking about the blurring between mainstream and special. For whatever you design, everything that is built will be able to be used by both parties. So please don't think about doing things with accessibility in mind for certain groups. So here we've got a specialist app. It's called iVoice, and it's being used by somebody who's got a temporary disability. In this case, she's got laryngitis. So she's using a specialist communication app to go on a date and to be her voice for the evening. So that's what that one is. If you want to start up the next one, this one hasn't got any audio at all, so I'll just be able to talk over it quite happily. Is that running okay?
It's running there, yeah.
So what we've got here is a demonstration of how software can recognize emotions. And the reason why this is powerful is because, I mean, it's being used by Facebook and Apple and Google to analyze your photo libraries, along with facial recognition and object recognition. You know, is there a chihuahua or a mountain or a swimming pool in this particular photo, and it's automatically labeling them for you. And facial recognition like this, where it comes to emotions, has got particular benefits for people with autism or Asperger's, for example, who find it really difficult to know what people are thinking or, you know, how they're feeling. They can't tell when somebody's happy or sad very easily at all. So something like this combined with, say, Google Glass, where it would come up in the little heads-up display, you know, amused, angry, can be incredibly useful from a social point of view, or even a safety point of view. If you know someone's coming up to you and they're looking aggressive or angry. And someone like myself who can't see at all, I would be able to use that, not with the little heads-up display, but with a little bone-conducting microphone behind my ears, for example, behind my ear, that Google Glass has, or the pivot head glasses have, so that I will be able to get it spoken back to me and get a little bit more kind of feedback about people's body language. So this sort of software is actually better than humans at getting emotion, and particularly micro and multiple emotions right, 86% of the time, compared to us mere mortals, which is 65% of the time apparently. So if we move on to the next one.
I just have to warn you, because we started late, we have to finish on time. So I don't know whether you want to jump onto any of them in particular, or whether you want to. We've got 10 minutes.
Oh.
Unfortunately, because we started late.
Thanks.
Should we just have a moment? Which one do you want to jump to?
Let's go to the Seeing AI, which is the next one.
Yeah.
This is a couple of minutes long, and it's showing all of those different things, object recognition, face recognition, in action.
I'm Saqib Sheikh. I lost my sight when I was 7, and shortly after that I went to a school for the blind. And that's where I was introduced to talking computers, and that really opened up a whole new world of opportunities. I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a software engineer. I love making things which improve people's lives. And one of the things I've always dreamt of since I was at university was this idea of something that could tell you at any moment what's going on around you.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
I teamed up with like-minded engineers to make an app which lets you know who and what is around you. It's based on top of the Microsoft Intelligence APIs, which makes it so much easier to make this kind of thing. The app runs on smartphones, but also on the pivot head smart glasses. When you're talking to a bigger group, sometimes you can talk and there's no response, and you think, is everyone listening really well, or are they half asleep? And you never know.
I get that all the time.
I see two
okay, we'll stop it
faces.
there.
40 years.
Oh, sorry. So, yeah, he was about to say a 40-year-old man wearing glasses with a beard, that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's really powerful, and that's being used all the time by Facebook and other people, other organizations to help process and add graphical and video data to the big data set that they're using for their machine learning. So it's incredibly empowering for people with disabilities like myself and Saqib Sheikh there, who also hasn't got vision. If we move on to for me it's number 13, but it's the bus shelter one. Mark, please, so you'll have to skip on a little bit too. Now this is a real bus shelter apparently in London. Turn the volume down a tiny bit. So what we've got here is augmented reality, obviously. Now we have talked about that before. We saw it in WordLens, for example, which does that automatic translation. And this is obviously just a bit of fun. But the reason why we're showing this is because things are changing so quickly, and you guys with your multimedia and digital content creation will be doing a whole range of different projects right across different media. And it may well be that this sort of thing, you know, sheets of glass as you enter buildings that have advertisements on them, or you know, telling you, you know, smart signs that show you where to turn and that sort of thing, may well be everyday, you know, occurrences in a few years' time. And you guys, if you're given a project like this wacky bus shelter, what would inclusive design look like there? So that's just a question to pose, and obviously you have to talk about it with people afterwards. If you want to turn it up towards the end, Mark, so you just hear the end of it.
Cool. That's it, next one. I'm just keeping us moving along.
Okay, fine. So, what we're going to do now is a bit of audience participation. So hopefully you guys have got something to write on, pen and paper, who knows, maybe, or a phone. Take out your phone, something where you can quickly jot something down. So what we're going to do here is a really practical illustration of inclusive design, or not. Actually, it's a really good example of really, really bad uninclusive, exclusive design. What we're going to play in a second is a video clip of a capture. You all know about capture. It's the distorted images that are essential to be able to complete, you know, to fill out an online form, that sort of thing. They're never for unimportant forms, because then they don't mind whether, you know, they get spammed by bots filling out that form. It's only for important things, which makes the stakes very high for people who need to be able to interpret what it is. The distorted image is so that optical character recognition, the text recognition that we saw earlier, doesn't work. But you might have seen there's a wheelchair symbol next to those. And the wheelchair symbol, it's an odd symbol because it's actually for people who, like myself, who can't see, who will get the audio version. Now what we're going to do is it's going to tell you the audio version. It's not the same as what you see on screen. It's nowhere near that simple. But I'd like you to write it down, the audio version, and then there'll be a gap and it will repeat it again. So you'll get 2 bites at the cherry. I want you to write down, try really hard to write down what you hear accurately. And then afterwards, we'll compare it with the people sitting next to you and see if anybody has got even a similar code, let alone we don't know if it's the right one or not. So if you want to fire it up, Mark, try your best, please, guys. The stakes are high.
2, 3, 2, 7, 9, once again, 9, 2, 3, 2, 7, 9,
Okay, cool. I'm sure that there were some meows in there. All right then, so if you could compare it to your neighbours, please, and see if anybody's got the same.
Anybody think they've been allowed in? Whatever it was they were trying to buy there.
Yeah. Any hands going up there?
Anybody got the same as the person sat next to them? Oh, no hands, Robin.
Yeah, well, what a surprise. I've done this quite a few times. And yeah, so, I mean, I don't know what you guys feel about it, whether that's kind of like, I mean, it is funny on one level, but on another level, it's super sad. Because for the internet for you guys, you know, unless you have a disability, I don't know, is a sexy place. It's a place where you like to hang out. You do everything on it, absolutely everything. But this is just an example, and I know capture doesn't happen very often for me. It's once or twice a week, but it's always a showstopper. But don't think of this as capture. Think of this as an example, an illustration of what uninclusive or inaccessibility looks like. And that it is that bad. You know, so for me, the internet, inaccessible apps are incredibly frustrating, and they're as impossible to use as what you guys experienced there in trying to get that code right. And so yeah, on one level funny, on another level it's a heartbreaker. So should we wrap up there, or have we got?
Should we play? Let's play Stephen Hawking, because I like that.
Yeah. Just the first bit.
Born in the computer age.
I'm gonna just push that back.
For all of them. I am delighted to accept this award as recognition for all the truly great things that disabled people can achieve. when technology has given them the chance to shine. I was lucky to be born in the computer age. Without computers, my life would have been miserable, and my scientific career impossible. AbilityNet continues to help disabled people in all walks of life, and the Technology for Good Awards remind us that technology is a vital part of human existence. They show us that the right tools, in the right hands, can help everyone, regardless of our frailties, to achieve our true potential and advance as a civilization. And I hope that the Technology for Good Awards will inspire people to think about the needs of everyone around them and make sure they can all benefit from the power of computers and the internet to change their lives for the better.
Can you stop it there?
Yep.
So, if you want to just bring up the last slide. So, just to, that was Professor Hawking accepting an award at a recent Technology for Good Awards that AbilityNet runs to pretty much do what we've been talking about here. Highlight how technology is super empowering for people with disabilities and a whole range of other people as well. And there are lots of different categories that awards get presented for. So, as Professor Hawking said, you know, if the right tools are in the right hands, then accessibility and technology can be incredibly empowering. I personally feel, you know, that I owe everything to the technology. It only takes one broken link in the chain. I might have the right equipment, I might have the right software, but if I'm accessing a particular website or a particular service that is not done in an inclusive way, then everything falls down for me. So I'm really hoping that you guys are going to be a safe pair of hands for the tools and the projects, everything that you're going to be doing going forward, and that you're going to think about accessibility, not just for disabled people, but in everything you do, because it's actually going to benefit every single person that will be using the things that you do going forward. So thank you very much indeed, and sorry about the hiccup at the beginning.
Great, thanks, Robin. Do we have time to take some questions? We have time for questions.
If anyone's got a question, just the microphone's over here, pass it down to you so you get recorded. Can you
There's a question.
just wait for the
You've got a question,
microphone?
Robin?
How can I help you test good equipment for disabled people? So I'm a member of Scope, so I in Brighton and Hove, and we and also another service company for disabled people called Hard, and we would love to test out loads of different technology for you.
Sure. We test websites and apps, so you can join our testing group for that,
That'd be really cool. Also, I'm really interested in your speech-to-text sort of technology. I'm just wondering if you know any better speech-to-text technology that I can use.
I don't know a lot about speech-to-text. Robin, what's your experience of speech-to-text?
Well, your speech sounds really good. Obviously, for other people, for other people, it can be more of a challenge. Obviously, things like Siri and the Echo
I don't like Apple products.
Okay.
No.
So, or Androids, Google now, okay, Google, you know, all of those are designed to listen out and try and understand everybody. So by definition, they aren't going to be as good at recognizing people that kind of diverge from that, depart from the norm. So something like Dragon Naturally Speaking or the Windows speech recognition software that's built into Windows.
I've used that.
Yeah, anything that can be trained, basically, and that will be unique to you, you know, we've had people that have very, very unusual speech, and with enough training, it can actually help. The one thing that, the golden rule with training, with speech recognition software that can be trained, is that you do train it. The vast majority of people who are using Windows speech recognition, Dragon Naturally Speaking, dictation on the Mac, don't correct using the correction dialog box, the formal way of doing it. They just change the text on the screen, or they say it again. If you do that, your recognition rate will deteriorate.
Well,
because
the reason I use speech to text, I have spinal cord quadriplegia, so I'm in a wheelchair all the time, and I can't actually type because my hands are funny. So like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I use it.
So you're probably blowing us all out of the water with regards
Yeah.
to productivity, because you can take at 300 words a minute, and nobody can type that fast. Not even Daredevil. We can, So yeah, absolutely. But make sure that you correct using the official correction dialog box, because then it will update the voice model. If you don't do it that way, if you just change the text on the screen or just repeat it, then it will assume that it's getting everything right as it goes, and it will actually reinforce. It will be more likely to get the misrecognize, do the misrecognition again. So just a caveat with all of the ones that can be trained, you have to train them in the official way, and then they'll get really, really, really good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Otherwise, they'll get worse.
Thanks for the question. Any other questions about anything we've covered? How much of what we've talked about did you know? Hands up if you've learned one thing. Hands up if you've learned 2 things. Put your hand down if you only learned 1 thing. So have you learned a lot, basically? If you find that useful? Yes, I think there's some gentle nods here.
That's the most we can hope for.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming. And thank you, Robin, for joining us there. Our final point on behalf of Building is just that we have a helpline. We have a free helpline, 0800 269 545. You can call. Somebody there is an expert in the use of technology for all sorts of disabilities, and can put you in touch with someone if there's a particular question about a particular piece of technology. We do have lots and lots of questions we're asked all the time, so do ring up whatever your question is. If we can't help you, we usually know somebody we can pass you on to, either within our team or in another charity or in another technology setting, if it's about technology. So 0800 269 545, and then on our website, there's My Computer My Way I was showing you earlier. That's completely free. That's all devices, all mainstream operating systems, and there's also lots of fact sheets and downloads that you can download for information about particular technologies that may be of interest to you. Great, so thank you very much for coming today. It's been great to see so many people, and good luck out there with your new tech and your new skills.
And thanks, guys, and I'll tweet links to everything that we've covered, plus all the stuff we didn't get round to, in 10 minutes' time on USA Today.
Great, so that's Robin's email address is USA Today.
My Twitter handle, yeah. Shameless plug, follow me there. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Just a quick note, can all my students just go back to class, because we've gone over quite a long time. So the level 2s, you can just go back to the classroom and work out what we're doing now. We'll probably just finish a bit early rather than right now, yeah? And everyone else, Jim and Paul over here, show them what they're